The gunshots echoed through the canyon as Elijah Grant raced across the barren landscape, his horses' hooves kicking up dust that spiraled into the crimson sunset. Blood seeped through his shirt, staining the worn cotton a deep red as he pressed his hand against the wound in his side. The outlaws pursuing him had fallen back, but he knew they wouldn't give up easily, not when he carried evidence that could send the entire Henshaw gang to the gallows. The year was 1876, and the frontier town of Copper Creek, Colorado, lay just beyond the ridge. Elijah's vision blurred, the landscape tilting precariously as his strength ebbed away with each passing minute. His loyal mare, Penny, sensed his weakening grip and slowed her pace, whinnying softly in concern. "Just a little further, girl," he whispered, his voice hoarse from thirst and pain. As they crested the hill, the scattered lights of Copper Creek winked at him like distant stars. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by darkness as he slipped from the saddle, his body hitting the ground with a dull thud. Nora James was returning from collecting herbs on the outskirts of town when she spotted the riderless horse wandering toward her small cabin. The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, and something about the mare's distressed behavior set alarm bells ringing in her mind. Following the animal's tracks backward, she discovered the unconscious form of a man, blood pooling beneath him. "Oh my goodness," she gasped, kneeling beside him. She pressed her fingers against his neck, relieved to find a pulse, albeit a weak one. "Mister, can you hear me?" The man remained motionless, his face pale beneath the dirt and stubble. Nora glanced around anxiously. Her cabin was closer than town, and night was falling quickly. With determination born of necessity, she managed to drag him onto her small cart, his weight nearly defeating her slender frame. "Hold on, stranger," she murmured as she led both her mule and his horse back to her cabin. "Don't you dare die on me." Back at her small homestead, Nora struggled to get the unconscious man inside. At 24, she had lived alone since her father passed 2 years ago, leaving her the cabin and the knowledge of herbal medicine that had made him respected throughout the territory. The townsfolk came to her now, just as they had gone to him, seeking remedies for their ailments. With great effort, she managed to get the stranger onto her bed. She worked methodically, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt to reveal an ugly bullet wound in his side. Thankfully, the bullet appeared to have passed clean through. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with yarrow and comfrey, and bandaged it tightly, all while the man remained mercifully unconscious. Through the night, she tended him, replacing cool cloths on his forehead as fever took hold. Dawn was breaking when she finally collapsed into the chair beside the bed, exhaustion claiming her. The sound of movement woke her several hours later. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows as the stranger stirred, his eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes the color of a summer sky. Nora straightened, instantly alert. "Easy now," she cautioned as he attempted to sit up, wincing in pain. "You've lost a lot of blood." His gaze darted around the unfamiliar surroundings before settling on her face. "Where am I?" "My cabin, just outside Copper Creek." "I found you collapsed on the trail yesterday evening." She reached for a plate she'd prepared earlier. "Here, I've made you some bread. You need to get your strength back." He accepted the offering, studying her with wary eyes. "You're kind," he said softly, the words seemingly drawn from him unwillingly. Nora shrugged, a hint of amusement crossing her features. "You were bleeding. I couldn't very well leave you out there for the wolves, could I?" Something in her straightforward manner seemed to ease his tension. "Elijah Grant," he offered, breaking off a piece of the bread. "Nora James." She busied herself checking his bandages. "Care to tell me who put that hole in you, Mr. Grant?" Elijah hesitated, weighing how much to tell this woman who had likely saved his life. Some men who don't appreciate me interfering in their business. Outlaws, she asked, her expression unsurprised. The Henshaw gang. They've been terrorizing settlements north of here. He winced as she adjusted the bandage. I was gathering evidence for the marshal in Silver Ridge when they caught wind of what I was doing. Nora sat back, studying him. And what exactly do you do, Mr. Grant? You're not dressed like a lawman. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Because I'm not one, officially. I track people, animals, gather information. Some call it scouting, others call it spying. Depends which side of the law they're on. A dangerous profession, she observed. It has its moments. He finished the bread, seeming stronger already. I'm obliged to you for your help, Miss James, but I should be moving on. Those men might still be looking for me. The only place you're going is back to sleep, she said firmly, pushing him gently back against the pillows. That wound needs at least a few days to start healing properly. Unless you want to reopen it and bleed to death after all my hard work keeping you alive. Elijah looked as though he might argue, but exhaustion was already pulling at him. 2 days, he conceded reluctantly. Then I need to get word to Marshal Donnelly. We'll see, she replied noncommittally, gathering up the empty plate. Rest now. Despite his protests, Elijah slept most of that day and through the night, his body demanding the time to heal. Nora checked on him periodically while tending to her garden and preparing remedies for her regular customers in town. She was careful not to mention her unexpected guest to anyone who stopped by, unsure of who might be sympathetic to the Henshaw gang. On the morning of the second day, Nora returned from feeding the animals to find Elijah sitting up in bed, examining the contents of her bookshelf with interest. You've quite a collection, he commented. Unusual for a frontier cabin. They were my father's, she explained, setting down a tray with porridge and coffee. He believed education was important, even out here, perhaps especially out here. Smart man. He accepted the coffee gratefully. Was he a doctor? Not formally. He learned about herbal medicine from my mother, who learned from her grandmother. When we came west, his knowledge became valuable to folks with no access to proper physicians. And now you've taken up his mantle. It wasn't a question. Nora nodded. It's a useful skill to have. Keeps a roof over my head. Elijah studied her over the rim of his cup. You live here alone. Since father died 2 years ago, she met his gaze evenly. I manage just fine. I don't doubt it. There was respect in his voice. But it can't be easy, she shrugged. What's easy out here? Now, let me check that wound. As she changed his bandages, Elijah remained silent, though she could feel his eyes on her face. The wound was healing well, with no signs of infection, a small miracle given the conditions in which he'd received it. You've got a healer's touch, he said quietly. I've had practice. She secured the fresh bandage. How did you end up tracking the Henshaw gang? Elijah's expression darkened. They raided a settlement near Silver Ridge last month, killed 3 men and took everything of value. One of the dead was a friend of mine. I'm sorry, she said softly. Marshal Donnelly's been after them for years, but they're slippery. I offered to help because I know the territory better than most. He shifted, testing his mobility. I need to get back to him, tell him what I found. And what did you find that was worth shooting you over? Their hideout location, names of associates in several towns, and evidence linking them to a stage robbery where the driver was killed. He met her eyes. Enough to hang the lot of them if the law can catch them. Nora considered this. I'm going into town tomorrow for supplies. I could send a message to the marshal for you. Too risky. The Henshaws have eyes everywhere. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, moving gingerly. I need to deliver the information myself. You're not strong enough to ride yet, she protested. I've traveled in worse condition, and probably nearly died doing so. Nora crossed her arms. At least wait until the end of the week. Give yourself a fighting chance. Their gazes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Elijah sighed. 3 more days, not a minute longer. Nora nodded, satisfied with the compromise. I'll still go to town tomorrow. We need supplies if you're staying. I have money, he offered, to pay for my keep. We'll settle accounts when you're healed, she replied, standing to leave. Try to rest, doctor's orders. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yes, madam. The next morning, Nora prepared for her trip to town, aware of Elijah watching her from the table where she'd allowed him to sit for breakfast. Be careful, he cautioned as she gathered her basket. The Henshaws might have men in town looking for me. I know how to be discreet, she assured him. I'm just a healer buying supplies. Nothing suspicious about that. All the same, keep your eyes open. Jacob Henshaw has a scar that runs from his left eye to his chin. His brother Thomas is missing 2 fingers on his right hand. I'll remember. She paused at the door. Try not to get into trouble while I'm gone. His smile was more genuine this time. I make no promises. Copper Creek was busier than usual when Nora arrived, the main street crowded with wagons and riders. She went about her business efficiently, purchasing flour, coffee, and sugar, along with some fresh meat from the butcher. At the general store, she lingered, listening to the conversations around her. Heard there was trouble up at Silver Ridge, the storekeeper was saying to another customer. Marshall's offering a reward for information on the Henshaw gang. Fool's errand, a gruff voice replied. Nobody crosses the Henshaws and lives to tell about it. Nora kept her expression neutral as she selected a few spools of thread, but her heart quickened when the door opened and 2 rough-looking men entered. One had a distinctive scar running down his face, Jacob Henshaw. She turned away, keeping her face hidden as she moved to another section of the store. From the corner of her eye, she observed him approaching the counter. Looking for a man, he said without preamble. Tall fellow, light hair, probably injured. Might have come through in the last few days. The storekeeper shook his head. Haven't seen anyone fitting that description. Keep your eyes open. There's money in it if you spot him. Jacob slapped a handful of coins on the counter. Same goes for anyone else with information. Nora completed her purchases quickly and left, careful not to draw attention to herself. As she loaded her supplies into her cart, she noticed several men wearing the same distinctive bandanas as Jacob and his companion. The Henshaws had indeed come looking for Elijah. The ride back to her cabin seemed interminable, fear prickling at her spine with every sound from the surrounding wilderness. When she finally arrived, she found Elijah outside, chopping wood despite his injury. "What are you doing?" she demanded, jumping down from her cart. "You'll tear your stitches." He leaned the axe against the chopping block, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Needed to move around, and you were running low on firewood." "I appreciate the thought," but she broke off, glancing around nervously. Elijah noticed immediately. "What happened in town? Jacob Henshaw is there," she said quietly. "Along with several of his men, they're looking for you." His expression hardened. "Did they follow you?" "I don't think so, but I can't be certain." She began unloading her purchases. "They're offering money for information on your whereabouts." "Then I need to leave tonight," he said decisively. "I won't put you in danger. That's ridiculous. You're not healed enough, and traveling at night will only make you more vulnerable." She fixed him with a determined look. "No one saw me talking to you. No one even knows you're here. The sensible thing is to lay low for a few more days, as planned." Elijah ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Nora, these men don't show mercy. If they find out you helped me, they won't," she interrupted. This cabin is far enough from the main road that casual travelers don't pass by, and I know how to keep secrets." She hefted her basket of supplies. "Now, are you going to help me with these, or shall I strain myself carrying everything while you stand there arguing?" A reluctant smile cracked his serious expression. "When you put it that way." He took the basket from her hands, their fingers brushing momentarily. Over the next few days, an uneasy routine developed. Elijah grew stronger, helping with chores around the cabin despite Nora's protests. They kept watch in shifts during the night, though no riders approached the isolated homestead. During the long evenings, they talked by the fire, sharing stories of their lives. Nora learned that Elijah had grown up in Boston, the son of a businessman who had expected him to follow in his footsteps. Instead, he had headed west at 18, drawn by tales of adventure and open spaces. He had worked as a ranch hand, a gold prospector, and eventually found his calling as a scout for the Army before going independent. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her mother's death from fever when she was 12, and her father's decision to seek a new start in the West. She spoke of learning to identify healing plants, of the satisfaction she found in easing others' suffering, and of her determination to maintain her independence in a world that expected women to marry or become destitute. "Don't you get lonely out here?" he asked one evening as they sat side by side on her small porch, watching the stars emerge. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but loneliness seems a fair price for freedom." "Freedom from what?" she considered the question. "From being someone's property. From having my life dictated by another's wishes." "Not all marriages are like that," he observed quietly. "Perhaps not, but enough are that I haven't been tempted to find out." She glanced at him. "What about you? No wife waiting somewhere?" He shook his head. "My lifestyle doesn't lend itself to settling down. Always moving, often in danger, not what most women dream of." "And what do you dream of, Elijah Grant?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Peace, maybe," he said finally. "A place where I don't have to look over my shoulder, people I can trust." His gaze met hers in the gathering darkness. "It's been a rare thing in my life." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different paths. Nora felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the evening temperature. "It's getting cold," she said, rising abruptly. "We should go in." The next morning, Nora woke to find Elijah testing the movement in his injured side, stretching carefully. "How does it feel?" she asked, moving to the stove to start breakfast. "Better. Still sore, but I can ride without reopening it, I think." Her hands faltered briefly as she added wood to the fire. "You're leaving, then?" "I need to reach Marshal Donnelly." He approached her, his expression serious. "Come with me." She turned to him in surprise. "What? It's not safe for you here anymore." "If the Henshaws somehow connect you to me, this is my home," she interrupted. "I can't just abandon it. It would only be temporary, until they're captured." "And if they're not, if they slip away again?" She shook her head. "No, I won't be driven from my land by fear." Frustration crossed his features. "Why must you be so stubborn? I'm trying to protect you." "I never asked for your protection," she countered, her voice rising. "I've survived on my own for years. This is different. These men have no reason to connect me to you unless you led them here," she insisted. "Go to Silver Ridge. Do what you need to do, but don't expect me to run away because you're worried." They stared at each other, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Elijah stepped back, his jaw tight. "As you wish," he said formally. "I'll leave after breakfast." The meal was a silent affair, the easy camaraderie of previous days replaced by strained silence. As Elijah prepared to depart, gathering the few belongings he had, Nora felt a growing hollow in her chest. It surprised her how quickly she had become accustomed to his presence, how empty the cabin would feel without him. She followed him outside as he saddled his horse, watching his methodical movements. "You'll be careful?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. He nodded without looking at her. "Always am, Elijah." She hesitated. "I appreciate your concern, truly, but this place is all I have." He turned to face her then, his expression softening. "I understand, more than you might think." He reached into his pocket and extracted a folded paper. "If anything happens, if you need help, take this to the telegraph office in Copper Creek. It's a cipher that Marshal Donnelly will recognize. He'll send help." She accepted the paper, tucking it into her apron pocket. "Thank you." Elijah mounted his horse, wincing slightly at the movement. "Thank you, Nora James, for saving my life." "Just doing what anyone would," she replied, echoing their first conversation. His smile was genuine if sad. "We both know that's not true." With a tip of his hat, he turned his horse and rode away. Nora watched until he disappeared over the ridge, a strange emptiness settling within her. The next few days passed slowly. Nora threw herself into her work, tending her garden, preparing remedies, and cleaning the cabin thoroughly. Yet everywhere she turned, reminders of Elijah lingered: the neatly stacked firewood, the repaired fence post, the empty bed where he had lain. On the fourth day after his departure, she was returning from collecting herbs when she spotted a cloud of dust on the road leading to her cabin. Riders approaching fast. Her heart leaped to her throat as she hurried inside, grabbing her father's old rifle from above the door. From the window, she counted 5 men thundering toward her homestead. At their head rode a man missing 2 fingers on his right hand, Thomas Henshaw. Somehow they had found her. Nora's mind raced. She could try to run, but they would easily overtake her. Fighting was suicide against so many. Her only hope was to bluff her way through, to convince them she knew nothing of value. She set the rifle aside; it would only provoke them, and stepped onto her porch as they arrived, forcing her expression into one of confused welcome. "Afternoon, gentlemen," she called. "Something I can help you with?" Thomas Henshaw dismounted, his eyes cold as they assessed her. "You the healer woman, Nora James?" "I am," she acknowledged, keeping her voice steady. "Are you in need of medicine, information?" he replied bluntly. "A wounded man, scout named Grant. Word is he might have come this way." Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. "I haven't treated any wounded men recently, just the usual ailments from folks in town." Thomas exchanged glances with his companions. "Mind if we look around?" It wasn't a request. "My cabin's small, as you can see, not many places for a man to hide." Despite her words, 2 of the men dismounted and pushed past her into the cabin. She heard them moving furniture, opening cupboards. Thomas watched her face for any reaction. "You live out here all alone?" he asked, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "Since my father passed," she replied. "I prefer the solitude, dangerous for a woman on her own." The threat was thinly veiled. Nora forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. "I manage." The men emerged from her cabin. "Nothing inside, boss," one reported. "No sign anyone's been staying there but her." Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Nora's face. "Check the outbuildings, all of them." As the men spread out to search her property, Thomas moved closer. "You know, Miss James, lying to me would be a serious mistake. If I find out you've been harboring a man I'm looking for." He left the sentence unfinished. "I have no reason to lie," she said evenly. "I don't know any Mr. Grant." One of the men approached from the barn, holding something in his hand. Nora's blood ran cold as she recognized a blood-stained bandage she had forgotten to burn. Found these in the ash pile, boss. Still had some blood on them. He held up the cloth. Fresh, too. Thomas's expression darkened as he turned back to Nora. No wounded men, you said. She swallowed hard. I treat many people in town, you said. Not here. He grabbed her arm roughly. Where is he? Gone, she admitted, seeing no point in further denial. Days ago, I don't know where. But you helped him, patched him up. Thomas's grip tightened painfully. What did he tell you? Nothing. He was barely conscious. I found him on the trail, bleeding. I couldn't just leave him there. Noble of you, he sneered. Jacob, he called to one of the other men. Bring me that rope from your saddle. Fear shot through her. What are you doing? We're going to wait for your friend Grant to return, Thomas explained coldly. And you're going to be our insurance that he cooperates when he does. He won't come back, she insisted. He was heading to Silver Ridge. We'll see. Thomas nodded to his men. Tie her up, and search the place properly this time. Look for anything that might tell us where Grant was headed or what he knows. Rough hands bound her wrists behind her back. They dragged her inside the cabin, forcing her into a chair while they tore the place apart. Books were thrown to the floor, jars of medicine smashed, furniture overturned. Nora watched in helpless rage as they destroyed her home and livelihood. Boss. One of the men held up a leather pouch he'd found beneath a floorboard. Look at this. Thomas took it, emptying the contents onto the table. Maps, papers with names and dates, sketches of locations, Elijah's evidence against the gang. Well, well, Thomas said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Seems like your friend left something important behind. He gathered the papers, stuffing them back into the pouch. Good thing we found them before he could deliver them to the marshal. Nora stared in disbelief. Why would Elijah leave the evidence here? Unless he had anticipated this very situation. Unless he had already delivered the real evidence and left these as decoys. Hope flickered within her, but she kept her expression carefully blank. What now? One of the men asked. Now we wait, Thomas replied. Either Grant comes back for these, or the marshal and his men show up looking for him. Either way, we'll be ready. He gestured to Nora. Keep her tied up but unharmed for now. She's our bargaining chip. As darkness fell, the outlaws made themselves comfortable in her cabin. They ate her food, drank her father's whiskey, and took turns keeping watch outside. Nora remained bound to the chair, her shoulders aching, trying to work out how she might escape. It was near midnight when she heard the faint sound of a horse approaching, moving slowly and quietly through the trees rather than on the main trail. The men heard it too, tensing and readying their weapons. That'll be Grant, Thomas whispered, a vicious smile spreading across his face. Davy, we'll get outside and circle around behind him. Jacob with me. He dragged Nora to her feet. You're coming too, sweetheart. Let's give your friend a proper welcome. They positioned themselves on the porch, Thomas holding Nora in front of him with a gun to her head. The approaching rider came into view, moonlight glinting off fair hair. That's far enough, Grant, Thomas called out. Step down from that horse nice and slow or the woman gets a bullet. Elijah halted, his hands rising slowly. Let her go, Henshaw. This is between you and me. Oh, I don't think so. Thomas's arm tightened around Nora's throat. She made it her business when she took you in. Now throw down your weapon and step forward. Elijah complied, his gun hitting the dirt as he dismounted. I'm unarmed, he called, moving into the clearing with his hands still raised. Now let her go. Not just yet. Thomas's voice was smug. First, you're going to tell me exactly what you told Marshal Donnelly. Nothing, Elijah replied. I never made it to Silver Ridge. Wounds slowed me down too much. You expect me to believe that? Thomas scoffed. It's the truth. I was heading back here to recover the evidence before trying again. Elijah took another step forward. You found it, I assume. We did. Which means you're no longer useful. Thomas raised his gun toward Elijah. Any last words? Several things happened at once. Nora drove her elbow hard into Thomas's ribs, making him stagger. Elijah dropped to the ground as a shot rang out not from Thomas's gun, but from the ridge behind the cabin. One of Thomas's men cried out, falling from his position in the shadows. Marshall's men, someone shouted. We're surrounded. Chaos erupted as more shots came from the darkness. Thomas shoved Nora aside, firing wildly toward Elijah's position as he ran for cover. Nora fell hard, unable to break her fall with her hands still bound, pain exploding in her shoulder as she hit the ground. Through the confusion of gunfire and shouting, she felt hands on her, cutting through the ropes at her wrists. Elijah's face swam into view above her. "Can you move?" he asked urgently. She nodded, allowing him to pull her to her feet and toward the cover of the trees. Behind them, uniformed men were emerging from the darkness, surrounding the outlaws. "You brought the marshal," she gasped as they reached safety. "I went straight to Silver Ridge after leaving you," he confirmed. "Delivered my evidence and brought back help. I had a feeling the Henshaws might track me to your cabin eventually." "The evidence they found fake," he assured her. "Convincing enough to fool them, but nothing that would have hurt the marshal's case." A final volley of gunfire erupted, followed by silence. Then a voice called out, "All clear, Grant. We got them all." Elijah helped Nora back toward the cabin, where Marshal Donnelly and his deputies were securing the surviving outlaws. Thomas Henshaw lay on the ground, blood pooling beneath him from a wound in his chest. "Your timing was perfect, Marshal," Elijah said, shaking the older man's hand. "Followed your plan to the letter," Donnelly replied. He tipped his hat to Nora. "Madam, sorry about the mess." Nora surveyed the damage to her home and property, feeling strangely detached. "Better than the alternative," she murmured. As the deputies led the prisoners away, Elijah guided Nora inside. The cabin was in disarray but structurally intact. He helped her to a chair, examining the bruise forming on her shoulder and the raw marks on her wrists. "I'm so sorry, Nora," he said softly. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen." "You came back," she replied, looking up at him, "even knowing it might be a trap." "Of course I came back." His voice was rough with emotion. "How could I not?" Something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Why did you really come back, Elijah?" He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Because in 5 days you gave me something I haven't felt in years. Safety, trust." He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Home." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Nora felt tears prick at her eyes. "I thought I preferred solitude," she whispered. "Until you left." Elijah's hand came up to cup her cheek. "I thought I preferred wandering, until I found a reason to stay." The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the same breath. When they broke apart, Nora rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you," he replied. "Marshal Donnelly offered me a job as his deputy in Silver Ridge. Steady work, a chance to put down roots." "Silver Ridge is only 2 days' ride from here," she observed. His smile was hopeful. "I was thinking the same thing." As dawn broke, they stood on Nora's porch, watching Marshal Donnelly and his men prepare to leave with their prisoners. The cabin was restored to some semblance of order, though many of her possessions would need to be replaced. "You're welcome to come to Silver Ridge until your place is properly repaired," Donnelly offered. "Town could use a good healer anyway." Nora glanced at Elijah, who stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "I might just take you up on that offer, Marshal." "For a visit at least." "A visit," Elijah echoed, a smile in his voice. "To start with." As the lawman rode away, Elijah turned to her, his expression serious. "I can't promise it will be easy. My past has a way of catching up to me, as you've seen." "Life out here is never easy," she replied. "But perhaps it's better not faced alone." "Is that a yes to visiting Silver Ridge?" She smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "It's a yes to seeing where this trail leads us." His answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'd say we're off to a promising start, Miss James." "Indeed we are, Mr. Grant." She stood on tiptoe to kiss him again, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Over the following months, Nora divided her time between her cabin and Silver Ridge, establishing a reputation as a skilled healer in both places. Elijah settled into his role as deputy marshal, his knowledge of the territory and tracking skills proving invaluable in maintaining order in the growing frontier town. They were married the following spring, in a simple ceremony attended by the townsfolk who had come to respect them both. Marshal Donnelly stood as Elijah's best man, proud as a father watching his son take this step. Rather than choosing between their two homes, they maintained both the cabin as a peaceful retreat from town life, and a place where Nora could cultivate her healing herbs, and a small house in Silver Ridge for the times when Elijah's duties required his presence there. 2 years later, as they sat on the porch of the cabin watching the sunset, their infant daughter sleeping peacefully in Nora's arms, Elijah marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Who would have thought," he murmured, "that getting shot would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to me?" Nora laughed softly, careful not to wake little Emma. "I think it was the bread that won you over, not the bullet wound." "The bread was excellent," he conceded with a grin. "But it was the woman who baked it that truly captured me." He brushed a kiss against her temple. "I'm still not sure what I did to deserve this life." "You survived," she said simply, "and so did I. Maybe that's enough." As darkness settled over the land they both loved, Elijah Grant held his family close, finally at peace in the home he had found, not in a place, but in the heart of a woman brave enough to take in a bleeding stranger and strong enough to stand beside him through whatever came their way. "More than enough," he whispered. "It's everything,